Hey there YouTube, AJ here, and hopefully you can hear me with all the ambient noise out today. But as I've said before, I live in the land of perpetual lawn maintenance, and if I wait for people to stop mowing, I'm never gonna get a video made. So, worst comes to worst, I'll have to overdub what I actually am doing here. That said, what am I doing here today? Well, most of you probably know what I have here. It's an early Ford Wishbone for the front suspension of a Ford car. This one in particular came off a Model A. And I also have this little guy here, which people may not know what that is. That is the pivot point for an F1 truck clutch Z-bar, I guess you would call it. This mounted somehow on the frame, and a tube went over it, over to actuator on the clutch on the transmission, and then you would push down the clutch pedal, that tube would turn, and that would apply the clutch over at the transmission side. So I've got my clutch pivot and this wishbone, and if you've been following along, you know I already have split radius rods on my hot rod, so I don't need those. So what am I doing here? Well, I need to mount the back end of my split wishbones. So I need to make mounts attached to my frame to do that. So this bar here is where that clutch mount goes, and over there is where it attaches to the transmission to actuate it. So the mounting point for this tube needs to be somewhere in this general area right here. And as you can see, my radius rod is going to end up also in that same general area. So my thought process is to make a mount that actually serves both purposes. It mounts the end of my radius rod and my pivot point for my clutch tube. I'm hoping I can make that work out. This piece of blue tape on the frame is roughly where the pivot point ball needs to be. This isn't in there straight. I need to cut that down. It won't fit between the rail and the mount on the transmission. So I've got to cut that down, but I've generally eyeballed it here just to get started. Now, most people just take and make a triangle plate that drop down off the frame rail here and mount that. And that makes perfect sense. It's easy to do, it's very functional, it works. Hot rodders have been doing that for ages, and I don't want to do that. Just a personal thing, I don't like the way it looks. I think it needs to have a little more, it's kind of a place on a hot rod that kind of stands out, and it's easy because it's easy to see, and it's also a place I think someone could add some personality to their rod. Now originally I was going to use this, which is the backing plate off the where the Model A motor mounts came through on the other side. So this plate used to bolt through to the rear motor mounts for the original Model A 4-banger that were in these cars. If you've seen my previous video, I actually took that motor mount, cut it up, re-welded it into a different shape, and made my front motor mounts for my V8 engine out of them. So I was going to continue that trend, use this to make a mounting point for my rear radius rod. And what I had in mind for that was to mount it on the frame rail, weld in my tapered bung in the middle, and then pie cut my radius rods and bring my mounting point up to that. Well, that's not going to work for a couple of reasons. One, if my radius rods were here in front of the body, I'm going to have to bring out my steering box there as well. So that kind of complicates matters. But since my radius rod mounting point's way back here, I could have done it back here and then brought my steering box out here. But then my radius rods and my pitman arm would all be vying for the same space, so that's not going to work either. Plus, I do think I'm still going to channel this body, which would bring the body down over to this point, which then I would have to cut a hole somehow in my body for that to happen, complicating matters to making it look good. So I gave up on this idea. I could, I guess, potentially make drop brackets out of these, but again, I don't like that look of just a drop bracket on the side. Something better needs to be done. Now these brackets are available from Speedway, and a lot of people will use those, and they are a little better looking than just a flat piece of steel cut down at a triangle. give you this nice little boss here, give you more strength to it. So I kind of like those, but yet they're still pretty common and pretty plain. So I don't know if I want to just go to that. And I could make this work by mounting my pivot point on the back side of it. So I might have to end up doing this, but I'm trying to avoid doing this. Again, mainly just because I want to be different, not like everybody else. And I want something that's going to have a little flair here, if you will. So what's a poor boy to do? Now I could just make my own bracket and make it nicer and do something with some shape and design. And that may be what it comes down to. I might have to do that. But before I do that, I still like my idea of using old original parts from these cars and putting them into different places. So right now, I'm working with the idea of somehow using this end of the Model A wishbone that everybody cuts off and pretty much throws away. But instead of throwing it away, I think I want to try to make mounting points for my split wishbones out of it. So that's what we're going to try to see if we can make that work. So I traced out the end of that wishbone, or I should say half of the end of that wishbone, on a cardboard, cut out the general shape of it. And what I'm thinking is somehow using that down here to make a mount for my wishbone, and then using making some kind of plate to go with it to fill in this area, which would do two things. One, it would give this bracket more strength, and two, give me a mounting place for my pivot ball for my clutch. So right now, that's my thought process. I kind of like that idea. I think because this plate here is going to have some roundness and shape to it, it's going to make it look completely different. And then it will have a filler plate in here, and then maybe punch a hole in this area of that filler plate to give it some style. And because my ball is actually going to end up being like in this area over here, so I think that's going to work for me. I think my cardboard concept design kind of plays it out that I think I can make this all happen. So let's move away from cardboard and start cutting steel. Alright, so we got the end of our wishbones cut off here. Obviously, I need two mounts, one for each side. So the idea now is to split it this way. I'm toying with the idea, do I want to leave this ball on here and try to actually split the ball? That seems like a lot of work for a little payback. Would that, to have that little whoopee on it, I don't know, would I want that or not? I think it's better just to cut off the ball, and we'll leave this part here and try to use that. But the ball itself, I don't think that's going to add much to it, although I could use it more like that. Nah, I think that's not worth it. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the ball and then try to cut it this way. Alright, so now you can see a little more clearly the general shape I'm going for. Now the hard part, I got to split it right through here, kind of like dead on that raised rib there. So this is going to be a little more difficult. So we took our Model A wishbone and we've cut it into 5 pieces now. We have the 2 radius arms that could very easily be used as split wishbones on another car. So we'll hold on to these. Maybe you find somebody that needs them. If not, maybe I'll end up using the steel for something else in my car. I don't know. We're not going to just throw that away. It may get used. Same with this round ball off the end of it. I'll hold on to that. I might find a use for that. Probably decorative. I can't really think of anything too functional I can do with that. We'll still keep it just in case. And then we have my actual mounts that I'm going to try to make here. I can't believe I actually split it that well. I don't know if you can see it if it shows up, but I actually split it right down that ridge and left the steel in there. There wasn't a lot to work with there, but what I'm trying to say is, damn, that's some good cutting. No, yeah, that's a little boastful, but I actually did a much better job than I was expecting. I did not expect to be able to keep all that steel all the way through there. So that's a bonus for me. Hopefully you can start to see my vision, what I'm looking at. And I will have to modify all the end for mounting. I want to put that plate in there. So let's go take a look at these on the frame. Obviously there's two ways I could use this. I could use it with the open side out here, but I don't think I want to do that. I think I'm going to put the open side to the inside, and then obviously I'm going to flare this into like a little teardrop shape to give it just a little more style. Round that off. That'll be, I think, just give it some good looks. Unfortunately, I've got the wrong tie rod ends here. The stud here is too big for this typical 7-degree forward taper, so that kind of messed up my plans. Because I do have these 7-degree stud bungs, I was going to use this to basically weld this into the end of my piece here. Envision it being actually cut into this piece, like into there, and do away with all this triangle. That's the general idea of where we're going. I do have the correct tie rod ends on order. They'll be here sometime next week, and I don't want to start cutting and shaping until I know exactly where this is going to play out. Once we get the correct ends and I get my height established, I'm trying to do this without having to pie cut my radius rods and bend them up. So I'm hoping this will work out the way I'm thinking. If I weld this in here, I think it's going to be right in the general area. So I think I got it. Okay, I don't know how long it's been, but I got my new tie rod ends. One thing that kind of hurt me is the new ones are shorter. So that means the overall effective length of my radius rods is a little shorter, which also means my mounting point for my tie rod has to be a little lower because it's not sloping up as far as it used to. So that's changed the plan a little bit. As I said before, we have two critical points here. We need to know where our mount for our clutch shaft is going to be, and this point here. Now I am going to bring my radius rods in from the back side of my mount, kind of like that, because that'll give me the most clearance up front for turning radius. I've got the caster set right now at 6 degrees, so my radius rods are kind of hanging roughly where I need them to be. What I don't want is this mount to be hanging way down low. I want to try to keep it just a little bit longer than this right here is right now. For now, what I'm going to do is make sure I'm in the right place for getting my clutch rod to mount on the back side of the radius rod mount. I'm not ready to cut my actual transfer bar, Z-bar, whatever that thing's called, and I'm not ready to cut that yet, so I've made myself one out of conduit, and we're just going to stick it on the actuator coming out of the side of the transmission. Put that bolt in there. Just going to have to eyeball it for straightness, but we can check it for level here. Okay, right about there. I have gone ahead and cut this cardboard out. Okay, so that's roughly where this one needs to be, and right there behind it is roughly where, right at the bottom of this point is roughly where our mount for the tie rod's going to be. So you can see we're getting close into the ballpark. So while I was traveling for work this week, I did kind of draw up what I kind of had in mind. Put that right here. And as you can see, I was going to try to put this nice speed hole in it and everything. So I kind of had that laid out to where in my head how this was going to work. Well, now you can see we're all starting to get close to the same place. And it may or may not work where it's at. We'll have to try it and see first, but then we might end up having to pie cut it. But what it all comes down to in the end is best laid plans, right? I planned this out how I wanted to do it. It's not going to work. I had this little trick here. I thought I was going to be able to make a template, cut everything, done. That's not going to work. So I'm going to have to kind of wing this a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take and mount my taper section into the end of this. I'm going to go ahead and cut a web because I pretty much know that all my mounting points are going to be real close to this arm anyway. I know all I have to really do is fill in this gap here to give me that mounting point, so that web can really just kind of come up like that, and I don't have to worry about it being too far out or anything. I don't have to worry about where that hole is going to be, because I'm not going to be able to do the hole now. We'll just make it a nice little smaller web now, and then I think what I'll do is put a plate on top of it all, weld all of this to that top plate, the web in here to this, try to make it all blend and look like it's all one big cast piece, and see how that fits, and we'll have to adjust from there. Okay, so what I decided to do is to slot this piece here in the middle. You can see there's like an indent. I'm thinking I'll probably be cutting like a tab on the end of this to fit down in there, rounded to fit, etc. And that'll give me enough material to weld everything to. So there's the basic idea. I got to do some more work to get these matching and fitting better. Probably going to do that with a file now. You can kind of get the idea of what I'm shooting for. Of course, all of this is going to be trimmed way down, so like this tab won't be there. This will be more rounded, etc., filled in. Yeah, we're close. I just got to start getting these hand fit so they're symmetrical side to side. Then start welding everything together, I guess. So we'll let those cool off so I can work with them, and then we'll get back at it. So I filed around, got these fitting better, kind of the way I want them. The one thing though, this opening here makes it kind of loose, and it's not going to be a lot of metal to weld on, so I'm worried about that. So I got an idea. Obviously, there's no way I'm going to be able to get in there to weld. I am not that good of a welder. I can't make that happen. But I'd like to fill up that space. So I'm going to JB weld it. No, I'm not. What I am going to do, though, is I have these two balls. And these two balls, at one point, were the shock mounts for my Model A axle. And these were on the top of the brackets I used to convert my 1946 axle to spring over. But I saved these two balls, so what I think I'm going to do now is I'm going to split these, cut them off, weld the halves in here, and that'll provide a ball for this socket, and that'll tighten it up, and that'll also give me, with these welded onto this tab, that'll give me a place to weld this to the sides here. And that'll make this all nice and strong. And that's still not my only mounting point. I still have another plan. The web is going to be the strength. Let's get to that. Okay, so we cut all these balls in half. The idea is to weld them onto here. I still got to cut them. Oops. I still got to cut them to fit in there. Got to radius them for this, etc. Once they're shaped to fit, and I'm not going to show all that, but once they're shaped to fit and they'll be down even with this, I'll weld them on there, and then they'll go in to the socket. And again, I might need to do some grinding and fitting, but that's what we're going to do now. So what we have here, we have the ball mounted on this side. We'll put one on the other side as well. Getting ready to weld those in now. Once they're welded on, they'll go in like that. And you can see I'll have more area to weld to make all that stick together better. So everything is fitted up to the point now. It's welding time. we got this piece tacked together. I just got it vice gripped onto the frame here. Got it kind of in place. I like the way it looks. You know, don't worry about this tab out here. That's going to get cut off. I'm going to take a piece and weld in here, along here, kind of C-section it here. Won't have my speed hole in it, I don't think, but you know, that's fine. This is where my clutch ball has to mount, so we got room for it. But yeah, I think once we get the web in there and we make the top mounting plate, it's going to be pretty strong. Right now I'm at about 5 degrees caster, which means this point really needs to go down. When I make my plate that goes in here, that'll space it down a little bit. I don't know if that'll get me into 6 degrees. I'd like to get closer, you know, like 7 if I could, but I don't know if that's going to do it or not. But yeah, I know it looks like kind of like crap right now, but it'll get there. It's just kind of tacked together. Our next step is to finish welding this up and then cut me a piece for my web. So I got the web rough cut. I have to trim it to fit in exactly with the bracket now, and then weld this to it and cut this off down here. And yeah, I think that'll look pretty good when it's all said and done. Alright, well, I got them welded together. I still need to dress the welds, get them ground down, but they're solid. Got a couple of places I need to touch up. One thing is this part here isn't quite square to this flange, or to the fin, whatever you want to call it. So I need to square that off, because otherwise it sits at kind of at an angle rather than straight up and down. I think that's going to look really good when I get it all done. And I don't want to weld this directly to the frame. I feel that'll be weak. So what I'm going to do is make another plate across here and then weld this whole thing to that plate. Once we get that plate made, we'll weld that plate to the frame. But all that's got to wait because I got to go out of town again. You won't notice it, but I will. It'll be a while. All right, I'm not super sure where I left off, but it's been 2 trips ago. I'm back to work on my wishbone mounts again. I know that I do need to square this off so they'll sit flush on the steel. But before I do that, I did do some research while I was on vacation. And my tie rod ends, I had them most of the way screwed into my radius rods. And it appears that they need to be only need to be about halfway in. So I'm going to move those out. That'll move my mounting point back a little further and get my clutch pivot point from being like right over top of the pivot point of the tie rod end. So it'll kind of move it into this general area here. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Then the other thing I want to do, I got to thinking about my toe end not being set yet on my front end, because my tie rod is adjusted all the way in and it still needs to go out further. I need the front of the wheels are too far. Wait a minute, do I have that right? Yeah. The front of the wheels are too far in this way, and I need those to be out further. And I don't think it's going to make a difference on where my mounting point is, but just in case, I'm going to go ahead and do that. Which means, since that's already adjusted all the way in, I need to take that tie rod off and shorten it. So it means I got to shorten both ends of the tie rod equally. and that way it will be able to adjust, pull the back of the wheels in closer and take the front of the wheels out. Now maybe we'll start with getting these in the right place. So I've got the tie rod ends adjusted out and evened out on both sides. Turns out the driver's side one was just a smidge longer than the passenger side one, radius rod. So I had to adjust for that in the threads on the tie rod end. But that's okay, no big deal. It wasn't much, so we're good. So now let's remove the tie rod and see about shortening that up. So I got the tie rod clamped into my workmate. Passenger side is blue tape, and did that to help me remember which way these things go, because they're threaded opposite, so you can tighten them on the car. So there's a little over 2 inches overall. So I had more than like 1 1/8 inches of threads inside this. I think that would go in further, because that's over almost 2.5 inches deep. Does it just not go? Threads go almost all the way in there. So I'm not happy with that. I think we need to try to run these threads in further. Maybe this just wasn't spread out enough. Alright, I got about maybe 1/8 inch of thread showing. I don't know. Is it going to be enough? Alright. Well, I've got that adjusted pretty much all the way in. I've got like 1/8 inch on either side, and I don't know if I can actually get it in the rest of the way. I'm hoping that'll bring it in far enough.
Overshot. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe overshot it a lot. Right.
I don't know if you can tell, but now it's like this. Ow. Alright, that's the problem with getting old. I just sneezed and put a cramp through my shoulder, down through my side. I can hardly move. Oh, jeez. Well, unfortunately, those are so both tight. I don't think it is anywhere possible to do that with that on the car. So I basically brought that in almost 1 inch on both sides. Alright, so I think what we gotta do is take it back off, adjust each tie rod in out 1/2 inch. Let's see how we look there. Alright, got them both at about 5/8 inches of thread showing. Let's try it again. Okay, that's not looking too bad. I think we're pretty close there. Let's measure it. 56. Seriously? If that is correct, I have 3/4 inch toe out. So I still got 3/4 of an inch toe out. So it needs to come in, which means this bar needs to spread the backs. Oh, it turns by hand. That's a blessing. we at now? This is the way it's supposed to work. Just turn the bar and make your tires move. All right, so right now I have 0 toe in. All right, right now I have 1/8 of toe in. We're gonna lock it in right then and there.
So let down.
That's just snugged really good right now. No need to kill it. Like I said, I might need to adjust it later, but I just wanted to hold that place. Well, the good news is I didn't need to shorten my tie rod. Bad news is I went way overcorrected. I didn't need to go near as far as I did, but oh well. All of that gets me where I left off at. That sucks. So now I guess it's time to go ahead and get these squared up. Okay, so we got these squared up, and now we're going to make plates to go on here. Just so we're going to weld these brackets to the plate I make, and then weld that plate to the frame. The reason I'm doing that is because I got this skinny little edge here, and I've got a frame that's kind of pitted, so you know, it's thinner metal. I'd rather have it welded good to this skinny edge, welded solid, and then give me more surface area to weld on this flat piece onto the frame. We're just going to rough this out.
Probably cut there.
Hoping I can cut one out, and then make a matching piece out of this whatever's left here. Now I don't have a fancy, what do you call it, CNC plasma cutter. So I just kind of, what I did was just rough cut out the steel out of what I had available. And their two pieces aren't exactly the same size. So what I do is I take what I can, clamp the two together. I got a straight edge on both of them to work with, so I clamped them on that straight edge. Then I'm going to put my piece in here and then basically draw out what I need that'll fit both brackets or both pieces of steel. And once I've done that, I will grind them together at the same time so that I make two brackets that are the same. And that's how we're going to do it. And hopefully we end up with two pieces of steel that are pretty much the same. They're going to be on opposite sides of the car, up under the frame. If anybody ever notices they're not exactly the same, I don't care. They're going to be close enough that you're going to have to really, really look. Okay, they don't look that great yet. They got a long way to go. But got my bases made and ready to start welding them to that base. Okay, I didn't mean to do this, but I went ahead and mocked these up. I'm not quite done grinding and welding on my brackets. I got a little touch-up work to do yet. However, I wanted to see how they were fitting and everything. However, to do that, I had to square up the front axle to both the frame and the rear axle to make sure everything was all square. And it took me a while to get there. And then once I was like almost there, I probably should have stopped and got the camera to show you what I was doing, but basically just a lot of measuring from point to point to make sure everything was equal on both sides and squared everything. Anyway, I finally got these clamped in and in the right place. And so rather taking them off and risking everything moving again, I'm just going to go ahead and tack them into place while I have them here. And when I go to do my final welding on the frame, because I'm going to be boxing the frame, etc., etc., a lot more to come. But I'm just going to be able to, I'm going to take everything off and I'll be able to flip the frame over and I'll just do my final welding and touch up all of that on my mounts then. So, but yeah, that's where we're at. Time to fire up the welder and we can be done. Alright, let's see if the tacks will. Well, that's a start. Alright, let's go get the other side. Alright, well, didn't fall off. Well, there it is. I got my mounts tacked into place for the front wishbones. They are not perfect by a long shot. They've still got to be fully welded into place and some touch-up welding done on the mount itself, as well as some touch-up grinding just to make it look better. But overall, I do like the way they look. I think they're kind of unique looking, and I think they're going to work just fine. I also got my toe end pretty much set on the car while we were doing this. I did measure my kingpin caster angle, and it's 6.4-ish on both sides. And I know they say 6 to 8's the sweet spot, and it is what it is right now. If I do need to later adjust that, if I don't like the way it handles, I can still pie cut my radius rods and bend them the fronts up a little bit, and that will give me more caster angle. I don't want to go any lower on my mount here, so that's where it's going to stay. So if we have to at some point, I will pie cut that and bend it back. At some point, I also want to drill my radius rods and put tubes through them and weld those in, but that's a way future project after it's up and running type thing, as well as drill the front axle maybe, you know, that kind of stuff. But that's all way future after the thing's together and running. But overall, I like the way it looks. I think it's going to work out pretty good. Just got to work on the welding, get it all finished up and finish finished, you know, grinding, painting, all that. So when I go to tear it all down, I'll do that. It's kind of hard to see, but in here, this is where my pivot tube is for my clutch actuator. So that will mount on the back side of this. So that's where that's going to be. And this isn't my actual tube. This is just a piece of conduit I was using to show me where I need to be. That'll get replaced by the real deal on the brake pedals. And oddly enough, it looks like I may not even have to shorten or lengthen this. It looks like I'm going to be really close to being the right length. So fingers crossed I won't have to cut this. Okay, so I think we're going to call that done enough for now. Hopefully, you know, when I get everything welded in permanently, it'll work out right. It feels, everything seems to be in the right place and seems like it's going to work okay. Sometimes you don't know these things until you get all done and you know, you go to drive it. So let's just hope it all works out. Like I said, I got 6.4-ish caster angle. Hopefully that's enough. And again, if it's not later on, we want to change it, we can. We'll just have to pie cut those radius rods and rearrange them. So from there, where do we go? These back radius rods, that may be the next thing we do. I'm not sure. Those have to be figured out, the mounts for those as well. But now that my front's kind of tied into position, I could go ahead and do my shock mounts. I could start working on my pedal assemblies now. My steering, getting those kind of figured out. So I'm not sure which one I'm going to tackle first. Work is still, you know, taking up a lot of my time right now, and so I'm kind of tackling like one big project a month right now. And this month's big project was getting those front wishbone mounts made and put in. I could have made it a lot easier on myself and just used a drop triangle, welded to the side of the frame, and been done with it. But I think these look better. I'm happier with them in the long run. Yes, I know I'm not done with them done. Everything's got to be finished. I'm basically trying to build the car to 80% so I can get it up and running, and then, you know, once I start tearing it back down, I'll do the finish welding and all everything. So anyway, that's where we're at. I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, especially if you watched the whole thing. That helps the channel greatly. Really appreciate that. Likes, comments, subscribes, that really helps. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm almost at 600 as of right now taping this. So I got basically 6 months to go to get another 400. Hopefully we can get there. I don't know. We'll see. If not, it's what it is. We'll keep on going regardless. So until then, YouTube, later.